Hey guys, what's going on? Ryan here from Indy Wrestling School. Today we're going to try something a little different. It's story time. Hey guys, what's going on? If you're new here, we usually put out videos about what it takes to be an independent professional wrestling promoter. And I give my tips and advice and stories that I've collected from my 10, 12 years of promoting independent professional wrestling. I wanted to do something a little bit differently because I've been fortunate and lucky enough to work with so many people that I grew up idolizing. And I think it might be of interest for you guys out there because I have some horror stories and then I have stories similar to what I'm going to tell you today. I loved ECW. When I first saw it, I didn't think anything I had ever seen was so unique, so innovative, so creative. It blew my mind when I first saw ECW. And I thought it was my own secret that nobody else knew about. And I loved it so much. And when I first started watching it, the world champion was the franchise Shane Douglas. And I was drawn to him. I had no idea that it was Dean Douglas, who I had seen years before. Side note, I also loved Dean Douglas. When I became a professional wrestler, the first thing I did when I ordered boots was made sure they had fringe like Shane Douglas. But anytime the franchise Shane Douglas popped on the screen, I was hooked. Fast forward several years later when we're relaunching our show. So we're running these live events in Morganville, New Jersey. And I thought about the people I wanted to use, and immediately one of the names was Shane Douglas. But I was also tentative. Hesitant because I had never met Shane Douglas. And I admired him so much and looked up to him so much. You're always a little hesitant because you don't want your heroes to fall short of your expectation of them. So I reached out to him about our first show. He was able to do it. So Shane arrives, and I'm nervous. I'm not nervous because of who he is or even the fact that I looked up to him for so long. I'm nervous because I don't want him to disappoint me. And I've heard so many stories of people meeting their idols and people they looked up to and just being disappointed. Shane walked into the building, I introduced myself, and he sat there and talked to me for 15 minutes. Everything from the traffic to the weather to what he was doing tonight. He hadn't even sat down, he hadn't put his bags down. He was just standing there talking to everybody who would come up to him. One of the most personable guys I ever met. Then he went out to the ring and had an awesome match with one of my buddies who also grew up idolizing Shane Douglas. And the guy who Shane was working was not the best wrestler. But Shane went out there and busted his ass to make him look like a star. And just doing everything he can to make our local small company look like $1 million. I was so impressed. We booked him on the next 3 shows. And every time I ended up walking away with more respect for Shane Douglas than I had before we ever even met. Side note, just so I can brag about this personally, I was trying to convince my friend Vin to put on a turkey costume. And I was trying to guilt him into it because it was a Halloween show and we were right between Halloween and Thanksgiving. So I wanted him to wear this turkey costume and Vin didn't want to do it. So I was trying to guilt him into it, and Shane and John Finnegan happened to be right next to me and were listening to me give Vin the guilt trip. And I was basically saying, look, Vin, if you don't want to do this for the kids, that's fine. If you want to make this about yourself and have a big ego and not put on a turkey costume, I get it. I mean, and I just kept guilting him. And Vin slowly but surely was starting to think about it. And then I finally, ultimately got him to put on the turkey costume and he went out there and did a great job. But the thing I'll never forget is that Shane turned to John Finnegan and said, doesn't this guy remind you of Paul Heyman? To this day, it's the greatest compliment I've ever received. Whether he was joking or not, I'm going to choose to assume he was serious, and it's something that I've never forgotten, and I'll never forget. But the thing that I wanted to discuss, and maybe I shouldn't cover this here, but I feel like it's important. Over the years, I would do tapings at wrestling schools, and it was just a way to get some of my local guys more ring time, because we're only running shows once a month. So this would enable the guys to get in there 3 or 4 times in one day with storylines, with angles, and this is stuff that is not out there. It's not online. It will never be seen by anybody. And we had the idea to use Shane because we enjoyed working with him so much. So he came and he was going to work 2 matches against 2 of our local guys. And we let him know this is not going anywhere. It's not going to be seen by anybody. It's just for fun and for practice for these guys. So Shane sat down with the guys he was working with and went over the match for an hour. A 7-minute match, and went over it and covered everything. And when things were suggested, like, okay, why don't we just do this? Shane said, no, that doesn't make sense. Let's try this, or let's try this. He took the time that he didn't need to take for a show that nobody will ever see because he loves the business that much. After however many years he's been involved, he still cares so much because he has pride in what he does. That's what made the franchise Shane Douglas a main eventer. That's what made Shane Douglas my idol. And after all these years, he still loves it. If it has your name on it, it needs to be good. And that's what Shane Douglas taught me that day. If the match is going to say Shane Douglas versus whoever, it's going to be good, it's going to make sense, and he's going to put his all into it. If you ever have a chance to go out and see Shane Douglas live, please do so. You will never, ever be disappointed. If you have a chance to meet him or just talk to him for a little bit, please, I implore you to do it. If you're an aspiring wrestler or an up-and-coming wrestler, please sit down with him and talk, pick his brain. The guy is a wealth of knowledge and will give anybody the time of day because the business means that much to him. That's all for this week. I know it was kind of a different format this week, but it's a story that I think a lot of people might be interested in. And personally, it's a story that I wanted to tell. Maybe I shouldn't have gone into all the detail I did, but it's all true. Shane Douglas is a huge inspiration for me, huge inspiration for a lot of the guys that I work with. And we were so lucky to use him. And just a side note, we ended up using him about a dozen times over the last 2 years just because he always delivers. And the experience you get, not just out in the ring, but behind the scenes and in the locker room, it's worth its weight in gold. If you like this video, please consider subscribing below. We put out new videos every single Thursday for 3 Minute Thursday, and I'll see you guys later.